All right, what's going on, guys? This is episode 2 of the Beyond the River podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Allrogue. That's at Tio the Man on Instagram, and of course, Beyond the River on Facebook. So for this episode, I've actually been really excited. My buddy Ryan, he's big into streamer fishing. He's one of the first people that I actually had in mind when I came up with this whole podcasting idea. We haven't had the pleasure of fishing together yet, Ryan, but I definitely have wanted to pick your brain for a while. I actually, Dan and I went out a couple of times streamer fishing, and I probably went on like a 3-day like streamer binge where I probably moved probably 7 to 8 like close to 20-inch fish, but like this is definitely not my area of expertise. This is more your department, so just want to introduce yourself real quick, see what's going.
My name's Ryan Shelley. A lot of people know me as streamer junkie at the Tackle Shack. That's where I work. I've been fly fishing for about 3 years, and about 2 years of that 3 years I've been streamer fishing. All it took was one trout that was about 22 inches, taking an articulated streamer, and it was all downhill from there. So it's pretty much all streamers for me. That's all I think about, all I dream about. So that's me. I'm the streamer junkie.
And so you run a page on Facebook. It was previously Streamer Junkie.
Yes, it's now Streamer Addicts.
Streamer Addicts, yeah.
That's a page I pretty much so we can all group together, and anybody has questions, tips, tricks, and I just like to show big old meat eaters too. So that's pretty much what that page is for.
And you catch some absolutely gorgeous fish. I personally enjoy following you on Instagram and Facebook. I always like brag to my dad and my brother. I know before when I was telling them about you coming in and sitting down, I was like, hey, like I know this guy. Like look at these fish that he caught. Like you catch some truly monstrous trout. And they, like the last couple that you caught have just looked absolutely like buck nasty.
I did start the year off pretty well.
Yeah.
I would have to say, but I don't want anybody to think that I do it and it's easy. I put in a lot of work. Your friend Dan, he's been out with me a few times, and he understands the stuff I go through just to get to these big trout. So every single one of these trout are earned.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, like I've done it a few times. Nowhere near as you have. I'm still kind of in love with my nymphs and my little trout, but I have moved some big fish, but I didn't land any, and I have yet to land. I landed the one. But I actually wasn't stripping it, and I didn't get that big streamer eat that you love.
Yep.
I actually, I was doing that. I missed one, but then I actually dead drifted it underneath a little undercut, and he came out and hit it there. But I never got that big streamer eat. I don't remember where I was going with that.
It's not always like that, especially in the winter. Nowadays, or now that I'm fishing, a lot of it's dead drift, casting upstream and just making sure your rod's in line with your streamer, and doing a lot of dead drifting. It's hard to get a trout to move out from on an undercut bank in the winter to move that far. I mean, I've had it happen, don't get me wrong, but the dead drift is killing it in the winter so far.
Yeah, and like I know I've missed a lot of fish. How many fish do you miss?
Well, for example, today I went out for 3 hours. I moved 4 or 5 fish, and I missed all of them. So there goes to show you, I miss a lot more than I catch. So
because I know when I first reached out to you, me and my brother had done a few mousing trips, and I missed. Like we were getting the big explosive takes on the surface, which actually stop your heart. And I want to talk about mouse fishing later in the episode, but. Or I was just missing fish, and same with streamers where I moved those fish. I had a few hit, and I just didn't pick them up.
With mouse, and I'll just touch on mouse real quick. It's just like bass fishing with a frog. You can't. As soon as you hear the explosion, you can't just set the hook, and that's your natural reaction to do that. You gotta wait until you feel the tug when they have it in their mouth and they turned and for sure it's in their mouth. And I missed more fish mousing than I've ever caught, but I can honestly say that I've never caught a trout on a mouse pattern that wasn't 18 inches or more. So, I mean, that goes to show you
Yeah,
how Mouson's worth it.
18 inches, that's an awesome trout. I don't care who you are. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, you've surpassed. What's your biggest fish? Bottom trout, actually.
A lot of people ask me that. I don't measure my fish because I like to keep them wet as much as possible and take a few pictures and, you know, kind of let the adrenaline wear down a little bit after everything that happens. And that big beautiful one that I've posted, you know, its head's pretty much like 16 inches by itself. That one was roughly up against my rod, between 24 and 25 inches. So I'm gonna say 24, just to lowball it, but it's still for the streams I fish, 24 inches is a monstrosity. And I put a lot of time in for a fish like that. So
Yeah. So what got you started in streamer fishing, and how long have you been actually doing it now?
I've been doing it solidly for 2 years, and I was a big nympher like you, and I love those days where I was catching 30 trout. And I mean, they're all average, you know, maybe topping out at 15, 16 inches nymphing. Every once in a while you move a big trout. But I was out with my buddy Josh, and we were nymphing. I was using my go-to nymph rig, mop fly on the top with a squirmy on the bottom.
I call that the Big Mac.
Perfect. And I threw it under a bush, and I rolled a massive trout. And I had a couple articulated streamers on me, so I put it on immediately and threw it under there. He came out and crushed it. And that memory will always be etched in my brain as seeing that thing come out in the big old white mouth, just inhaling it. And I haven't looked back since. I got rid of all my nymphs a couple days later, my dry flies, and I haven't looked back since. And that's what I live for, is the streamery. It's not about the fight. You know, it's obviously about the size of the trout, but it's all about seeing the eat. And when I don't get that, I don't. It still feels good to catch a big trout, but seeing it come out and actually pulverize your streamer is what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, they say the tug is the drug.
It is.
And that's a pretty big tug. I was actually out one day with my buddy, and I, you know, the adrenaline rush is insane, and you're probably more in tune with that than I am. And I had a big eat. And, you know, I exaggerate because I never actually caught the fish, and I only saw it in the water. I'm like, oh, that's the biggest trout I ever hooked in my life. But my buddy was standing behind me, and this thing rushes out, eats it, and I'm just in complete and utter awe. Like, my body did not function like you're supposed to strip set. I didn't do anything. Like, I just sat there, like the fish ripped it.
I still do that, man. I've been doing this for a while, and I still see fish come out and eat my streamer. And you think, as much practice as I've had, strip set, you're good. I've watched so many trout come out, and you just completely lose what you're doing, and you watch it come out and eat it, spit it out, and go back, and then you strip set. But I call it a win if you get a trout to come out from his own safety and give up all regard for his own safety to come crush your streamer. You won. You won. Just work on your strip set.
Yeah.
No trout set.
Yeah. Well, and I always talk to my grandfather, and he's more big into the experience. Like, he's got a little John boat now. He's not really mobile enough to go fly fishing with me. But and he likes to just sit out there in the sun. He really doesn't give a crap about catching a fish.
Yep.
And he always, reminds me, he's like, to see something like that, to see a fish that big, like, that's something special. And it definitely is. Like, how often do you see like a 25-inch fish? Like,
how often have I in the past 2 years? I probably, honestly, without a doubt, could say it was a 25-inch trout, probably 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that stands out in my mind is my buddy had a 15, 16-inch trout on and was playing it on a 3-weight. And this big old black thing. I mean, he was the darkest trout I've ever seen. Came over and just T-boned it and carried it off. And I threw my streamer out there and ruined it, obviously. But that trout was the biggest trout I've ever seen in Potter County. And it still haunts me every day.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. But it just goes to show you've seen 3, to how rare a fish that size is, and you got to consider yourself fortunate to have. I'm sure I've never seen a fish that's 25 inches. That's no doubt. And I have a similar story. One of the first times I was introduced to streamer fishing was with Dan, and we were nymphing, and we were having one of those big number days where we were catching a crap ton of like 9-inch fish. And we actually have it. It's one of Dan's YouTube videos. And I have this little fish on, and all of a sudden this huge trout just rushes my little thing, and I'm like, oh my God, did you see that? And I just went back to nymphing. I didn't keep streamers in my box, but Dan did. Dan had this articulated streamer, and
Was that the one he lost?
Yeah,
it popped off.
Not even that. The genius that Dan is, Dan's a very intelligent fisherman, natural instincts.
Yeah.
He ties his articulated streamer to 4X tippet.
Well, there you go. There's your first mistake.
And he strips, and hits, and we see the fish flash, and it was definitely over 20, and just 4X tippet, just hit, gone, snap.
Well, that brings me to what I use in my setup. What works for me. I get a lot of people that come into the tackle shack and ask me what's my setup and what works for me. This is what works for me. You can use a floating line. I just think if you're streamer fishing and you're using floating line, it's just you're working against yourself. You should at least use a streamer or a sink tip. I personally use a full sink because I want it to get down. I'm fishing subsurface. I'm not fishing a dry fly, so I want it down. My leader is no more than 2.5 to 3 feet long. Shorter if I can get away with it. 15 to 20 pound test. I don't use anything lower or anything higher. I promise you these big trout are not worried about your tippet or your fly line or anything. Once they're keyed in on your streamer, it's seek and destroy once they see that thing, and they're not worried about the fly line attached to it. Obviously, I've proved it. I've gone to these small streams and used 15 pound test. That if you were nymphing, you probably couldn't get away with that.
Definitely not, no. That was actually, someone had written in and they wanted to know because they know the nature of the streams that you fish and they're pretty small.
Yep.
And they were the whole debate. Personally, what I've done is because I don't have a full sink line yet, because it was something I wanted to ask you too, because I've started reading George Daniel's strip set.
Yep, that's the Bible to me.
And he has all those, this line, this is good for this situation. And I was wondering just if you had your one setup, because I use the floating line, and I typically I have a lot, because I like to tie my own flies and fish my own streamers, and I fish a lot of those big flashy like bunny rabbit streamers, but I don't end up fishing them because they're the rabbit strips, they float. So you can't ever get down. That's why, particularly whenever you see me fish, I always use the headbanger sculpin.
That's the number one pattern. It's the mop fly of the stream world. If you're having a crappy day, throw a sculpin on. You will catch fish. I've been going back and forth between weighted flies and unweighted flies. There's such a difference in it. It's ridiculous. But I've come to find out that the perfect combination for these small streams is a deer hair head, a big packed one so it pushes a lot of water, and barbell eyes, because you do want to get down. Because I've tried using zoo cougars where they have no weight, and it just floats on top of the water, and that's not the column in these small streams that you want to be fishing. You want to be fishing the bottom or getting under the banks or under the logs, and I just find that the deer hair pushes a lot of water, and with a sink tip or a full sink line, you can get that down there with no problem. A lot of people had split shot, and I'm completely against that because it just, you lose touch with your string if you add more split shot. And if you're using full sink line or sink tip, you shouldn't have to use split shot. But I think if you're having problems with your streamer getting down, shorten your leader down a little bit. I've gone down to under 2 feet before and got away with it. So if that's your problem with getting it down, That's what I suggest. Not adding split shot, or just get rid of your floating line.
Yeah.
Altogether.
And you fish Cortland?
Yes, I fish Cortland on 444 right now, the full sink, and I love it. Probably hands down, sorry Portland, but probably the hands down my favorite sink line of all time is Orvis, the Hydros.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that thing is just beautiful. My cat chewed it in half, so I don't have it anymore.
Your cat chewed it. That's not. What a way for a line to go out. Yeah. So we talked. Is the headbanger sculpin your favorite fly then?
Yeah, hands down.
Hands down.
A black and olive headbanger sculpin. I would be confident running a fly fishing competition with it. That's how confident I am.
Really?
With those.
I don't think that's comp legal. You're only allowed one hook, no articulated. All these.
Oh man, you can't do away with the stinger.
So you tie your own flies or no?
I do. I have a problem with sitting down and tying for a long amount of time, so I tie like 1 or 2 streamers, and then I'm done.
Yeah.
But I get most of my flies from Dominic from Streamer King Flies. He customizes anything I want. He knows what works for me, so.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you mentioned Dominic because we talked a little bit before this that I'm actually going to get to tie with him this weekend. He's selling flies at Niagara Fishing and Outdoor Expo, and so am I. So I'm hoping that I'm going to have Justin and him or together for a podcast or them individually. I haven't really run this by them yet, so if they're listening to this, it'll be heads up for them. But and I was also hoping maybe have them show me a few ties while I'm there, because I'm the same way, especially with streamers, because they're long ties.
Yeah, I mean, you sit down for a half an hour, and then you're like, wow, that was only one fly. So
Yeah.
I have mad respect for people that can sit down and tie a dozen streamers.
And so you're fishing a full sink. You're usually using a somewhat weighted fly. How often do you catch bottom?
A lot. If you're fishing it right, you're gonna snag the bottom. I lost one streamer today by hitting the bottom, but that was a headbanger sculpin.
Yeah.
Especially if you're fishing a sculpin right, you're gonna snag the bottom. You're gonna snag the log jams. It just comes with the territory.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you gotta think about a sculpin, like that's natural for them to be on the bottom. Like that's natural prey is them on the bottom. So you have your sculpin higher in the water column. Like their head is flat for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't take your sculpin if you were stripping it up through like a bait fish. But if you want to properly do your homework on prey items, I seriously think this is a great tip. Like crayfish, learn how they move. Sculpins, learn how they move. The key thing about sculpins is they do not have an air bladder. So when they do go up into the current, they come immediately back down. So there's no swimming across the hole kind of thing. They kind of scutter or scatter across. And you mimic that with a headbanger sculpin, and it's just a deadly streamer. I don't know if you've seen my pattern, the simple bunny sculpin. It's literally just a bunny strip and that cross-cut bunny. That's all it is. And it's just a killer pattern because it has that sculpin profile. And I've come to find out that these 5-inch headbanger or 7-inch headbangers that I'm throwing aren't quite the kind of sculpins we have in these streams.
Yeah, they're
more like a half an inch like that.
Yep.
So I honestly don't know what they're taking it for, maybe a crayfish, but it works. So.
Yeah. Well, if anything else, because we do a lot of electroshocking and stuff with class, and we do shock the sculpins from time to time. They are about an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches. They're not 5, but I mean, if anything, they're just seeing the 5-inch, and they're just aggressive at it.
That's a lot of the times I get to go out and streamer fish is not like prime time. Like we were talking about mousing, that I come to find out all the big browns are out just feeding. You'll catch them I've caught them in like less than a foot of water, when you wouldn't even see them during the day. I think during the day, what I'm doing is initiating a territorial response kind of thing. These big browns get to the point where they find prime lies and they don't want anybody else in them. They're very territorial, so I think when you throw a streamer by them, they get really mad, and it's either they crush it. That's a lot of times when you get that stinger, the stinger hook. They're just coming over and nipping the tail until you get out of there, and you caught them. You nipped the wrong tail, but I think that's a lot of the reactions that I'm getting during the day. But at night, it's completely different. We'll get on that later, but
Yeah. So before we get to that, I just want to talk a little about tactics. You mentioned you're fishing a lot of dead drift right now.
mm-hmm.
So how exactly do you do that with the full sink and the weighted streamer?
It's tough because the weighted line wants to sink. You're not going to have any of that floating line helping you out. Most of these streams, I could literally, if I ran, I could probably jump almost all the way across them. So you're kind of taking that tight lining kind of thing, kind of keeping it straight. And you know about this. So if the line stops, you either set the hook, you got a snag, or it's a fish. I just come to find out that they're not going to move very far unless it's a deep hole. You know, if you're working runs or inside bends or something, they're not going to chase down something when they have the prime lie and it's cold. I just think the dead drift is a killer tactic in the winter, and everybody should use it. Just make sure. The one tip I would give you, because you'll miss a lot of bites if you're swinging it when you're trying to use a straight line. I kind of stand at the stream at an angle, like, you know, say the water's coming towards me, cast up, straight up, and then let it sink. And then as soon as you know or you feel like it's at the right spot, you start stripping, and you make sure you have a tight line that entire swing out. And if you have any loops, you know, any slack in your line, you might feel the take, or see the fish roll, but you're just not gonna have a tight line. And that's what it's all about, is keeping your streamer tight with your rod. And all the fish that I picked up this year, that's how it was.
Really?
Yep.
So it's basically just like a tight line, but you got a big articulated streamer.
Pretty much. And when I say dead drifting, it's not like completely just, you know, chucking it and letting it come down. It's, you know, a couple twitches here and there, like a dying bait fish,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just deadly.
Nice. So what's your prime time? I love the meme that you posted where people say it's getting close to the fall. They say it's streamer fishing, and you post it's always streamer fishing. Is that your prime time, the fall?
My prime time, honestly, my favorite time to fish is the winter, just because of the, you know, it's kind of like solitary. I never see anybody else doing this crazy stuff I do. I would have to say spring is when I come across more trout than anything else. I think it's because the winter come off and they have their feed bags on. You know, you have insect life and all that stuff. The whole streamer season thing, we'll touch on that.
Yeah.
It's not streamer season. It's spawn time, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. Is these big browns get very territorial. I mean, they will literally crush anything that moves in their hole because, you know, they're out there for the ladies, and it's so easy to get them to eat, man. You could go to a deep hole and just sit there and throw your streamer at it 15 times until he gets aggressive enough to eat it. And I just don't think that's very sportsmanlike.
Yeah. And you don't fish during the spawn.
No, I completely shut off on the spawn.
And I don't either. That's a personal opinion. I don't fish for browns during the spawn. I was doing a lot of steelheading, over by the lake. But yeah, I don't fish for them either. This is something I talked to my buddy Rich about. Their eggs, they overwinter in the stream. They don't hatch. So how do you? Obviously, I still fish this time of year. So do you. How do you does that go into your mind when you're waiting and stuff?
Well, if you think about it, one step could kill a whole generation.
Yeah.
And that's something you're trying to protect, especially these big, beautiful browns. They're only going to live for so long. They have to have, their offspring has to fall behind them. And I tend to stick to the edges a lot if I have to get in the water. I try to stay out of the water as much as possible. Just the number one rule is stay away from clean gravel areas. They're obvious. If it's covered in silt, and obviously there's not going to be eggs there. But try to stay out of the water as much as possible.
Yep.
That's what I do. I mean, it's winter. You're gonna thank yourself for
Exactly,
not getting in the water
yeah.
as much.
Yep.
But if you have to, just stick to the edges. If they laid it right next to the edge, that's the trout's fault. They shouldn't have laid it right on the edge of the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for real though.
But yeah, I think about that every time I go out in the winter.
Yep. So it's always running through my mind. Sometimes I worry. Sometimes I just walk around a good run if I have to.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
it's not worth it. It's better. I'd rather still be catching these fish 20 years from now than catch one today.
And just to highlight on the winter fishing, my favorite, you said it in one of your blog posts the other day, my favorite part about winter fishing is I don't have to wake up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning to beat that high-rise sun. And I want that sun.
Mm-hmm.
Like today I was out, and if you weren't out streamer fishing today, you were doing yourself a disservice. They were on fire. I couldn't set a hook.
It happens. Even I've timed it right, and I'm not as in tune with this stuff as you, and I haven't hooked on. I'm still hoping for that big brown, and I want to get more into mouse fishing now. It's stupid as wintertime because now I'm like pumped for mouse fishing. Like I tied up a bunch of mouse patterns like a month ago. But
which patterns did you tie up?
I talked to. You've seen the hook shots mousing thing?
JC. So you talked to JC. So the Master Splinter Mouse is what you.
Yeah, I'm tied the Master Splinter. I talked to Joe, the guy that went with JC, but so that's why I tied up because I was using these big mouse patterns, and where I was fishing, I don't know if the mouse might have been a little too big for the fish. Plus, we talked, and I was setting way too early. But yeah, the Master Splinter Mouth is what I tied up, and
hands down, that's my go-to. I tweaked it a little bit. I put more foam inside of it, because casting that all night, you think foam wouldn't sink, but it eventually does. That Master Splinter fly has caught me more big brown trout than, dare I say, streamers, like big quality brown trout, I should say. Mousing's a whole different game, whole different setup. I use floating line, obviously, for that. Very short leader. They're not going to be a leader shot at night. Make sure you have 15 to 20 pound test, because you're going to be setting a hook like your life depends on it. And hit every inch of the water. They could be anywhere, because what they do during the day is they have a prime lie, which is the resting area where they feel safe, and then they have hunting lies where they can travel up to a mile. Obviously it's probably smaller in these small streams, but in the big river system, they can travel up to that, and you can catch them in between that. And I literally fish every inch. It's like cast, strip, and then a foot, and then I do the same thing. And I can't tell you how many trout I've caught in less than a foot of water. And
now you say strip. So when you're fishing your mouse, you're stripping your mouse back to you.
Yeah, do not stop. Just picture a mouse falling in instant panic. You're trying to get to the safety of the bank as fast as possible. Mice never pause. And so you want a continuous. If you're casting and you get on that bush, you hang up on the bush on the other side. You're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
I've had pop off the bush, and that's when the trout hits. But most of the time it's with that fast strip, and they just annihilate it. But it's so hard not to set the hook when you're stripping that at a steady pace, and something just blows up and it's in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
But you gotta wait until they take it, because sometimes they come up and sip it like they do a dry
Yeah,
fly.
see, because I've fished it. When I fish it, I don't strip it. I haven't stripped it. I've fished it on a swing across the current, and I've had them sip it like a dry, and that was the closest I came to actually landing one. Is it sipped it like a dry, and I had them on for a couple seconds, they came off. But yeah, so
how big do you think it was?
I have no idea. This was fishing water that I wasn't super familiar with, the size of the fish, because I haven't caught that many. But yeah, that's something I didn't know, because I was always wondering that, because that always seems like that's how you get the aggressive take.
Yeah, I have paused it before, but I've also seen a brown trout eating a frog. So that's another thing I got to witness. That was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. But they do eat a lot of frogs in these small streams. So pausing's not a bad thing. I've just, from my experience, casting to the other bank and making that loud plop. You want to make a loud plop, like something fell in the water, and just a steady retrieve back to you. And just be ready to jump out of your shorts.
It is, it does get your heart rate, especially in the dead of night when it's just quiet.
When you're all by yourself. And that's another tip. Don't ever use a headlamp. That's the number one question with mousing that I get at the tackle shack is, what equipment do I take? I do take a headlamp, but it has a red light attachment, and I use that very sparingly. That's maybe to change a mouse if I lost it, which happens rarely when you're using that pound test and a mouse. But as soon as you hit that water with a regular headlamp, the fish are gone, and you're gonna ruin the whole stretch just by putting a headlamp on. So, what my number one tip is to go to a stretch that you know you are gonna mouse. A couple nights before, kind of get the layout of where everything is. There's a log jam there. It's beside this kind of thing, and it'll help you tremendously on the stream at night. Everything looks so much different at night. So a deer running through the woods during the day might catch your attention. At night, it's probably gonna make you crap your pants.
Yeah, for real. I actually missed one. I was swinging at the bottom of the thing, and you do kind of get a little eerie at night when you're by yourself, and I'm like, oh, what did I just hear? Look upstream, line gets ripped right out of my hands. Missed the fish that way.
One thing I did last year was something I normally don't do is fish streamers at night, because I've always, it's nighttime, it's time to throw stuff. I'm always like mouse. I want that top water eat. But I dabbled in it, and I caught one of my biggest brown trout last year was from fishing streamers at night with a full sink line, short leader, and a really fluffy black sex dungeon. And I mean, I love my mouse takes, but that was just as aggressive. Like his tail came out of the water and everything. It was like a shark. It was awesome.
It's funny you mentioned using black sex dungeon at night. They always talk light day, light fly, dark day, dark fly. What are your thoughts on that? What kind of colorations do you look?
I don't think you should really think about color at night. You're looking for profile. If the only time mousing is gonna work is if the trout are looking up. If you have the moon out and it's kind of illuminating the bottom, good time to use the streamers because they're looking at everything. When it's pitch black out, they're gonna be looking up and feeding on mice. I just honestly think that black is my go-to color, even with the Master Splinter mouse or the streamer when it comes to nighttime. Just because you're looking for that profile, and you don't need to see it at night. Black would have to be my go-to. That completely changes over into daytime.
Yeah. What about daytime?
Daytime, I would have to say olive. With our streams and our freestone streams and the bottom with the algae, olive has always been killer. Like mottled olive, with a little bit of black in it, is just a killer combo. And if I had one fly to use for the rest of my life at night, it probably would be the black sex dungeon, I would have to say.
And that's a big deer hair head fly, right?
Yeah. I don't have any with me today, but it has deer hair, has the barbell eyes on it, so it has a little bit of weight to it. It's one of those patterns that it depends on which color you get. It can look like crayfish, gulpin, baitfish. It's so versatile, man. You could really use it for anything. You could use it on a floating line if you needed to. It's just one of those beginning everybody knows what a sex dungeon is.
Yeah, well, Kelly Gallup, it's
Exactly.
basically where this whole craze came from, as you can.
And like I suggest that to a lot of people with sex dungeons because it's easier to cast than it is a headbanger sculpin. The headbanger sculpin is notorious for taking rod tips. I took 7 of mine last year, so yeah, I do not recommend just going out and chucking that if you've never cast before.
So another question we got, that message in from online was someone asked, what's your favorite county to fish in?
Oh, gonna make me give up my.
Well, you don't have to, because we can talk about that
okay.
too.
Everybody knows that it's Potter County. A lot of people don't realize the potential that Potter County has. We have beautiful miles and miles of beautiful streams that are just. If you look at a magazine, you see those streams in those magazines, and that's what it looks like in Potter County. And a lot of these places I go to has never seen footprints before. And these brown trout have never seen a human and never been held by a human. And that's kind of a cool aspect of with letting go with a trout is maybe this is the last time. This is the only encounter he's ever going to have. And I'm the person that he had it with. But Potter County, hands down, is in the state of PA. I've only fished a few other river systems and I don't want to fish any other ones. Potter County has so many big brown trout. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and
it keeps me satisfied, guys. Yeah. So.
I mean, I wrote a one blog. I don't know if you read it about the transformation, the winter transformation, where I talked about all of a sudden I was in Montana, and that's where I was fishing this quiet stream in Potter County all by myself. You look up, the mountains are there. It does have like a westerny feel, like you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's special. Like it's quiet and like you're in tune with everything around. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place.
It's really near and dear to my heart, to be honest with you. And a lot of people ask me, for spots and stuff like that, and I'm hesitant to do it because not everybody is catch and release, and I'm a huge catch and release guy. I believe in having a healthy fishery, you need to let go especially the big breeding males.
Yep.
I mean, those guys are the ones doing all the breeding and spawning and stuff that we need. And to see them on a streamer is just, it's heartbreaking to me. It's happened to me before. And that's the reason why I don't tell people stream names.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody wants to know, you can literally go to fishandboat.com and print off the Class A list.
Yeah.
And you have every spot in Potter County.
Yeah. And I read your blog. You've written a few pieces, and you talked about spot burning, and that's a topic that I feel like we talk about with most of the people that I fish with. And you compared it to telling someone your spot to you wouldn't let someone sleep with your wife.
Well, that's the way it is. These trout I have an intimate relationship with. It's not that I catch them all the time, or it's the same trout or anything. It's just going out there and just seeing these places destroyed would honestly crush me.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like going out to a place where nobody else has been there and hooking into a massive trout and holding it in your hands. I can't put a word on that feeling other than serene, or nothing else matters for that one moment. Mm-hmm. And to give that moment up to somebody else, to put a fish in a freezer, to get freezer burn,
exactly,
is not worth it to me.
It's just, and it's it's kind of it's become like a social media thing where people see these spots and they want the instant gratification.
Yeah, that's the first 2 questions you see on any post is, what stream did this come out of? Or what area was this? Or what town was this? Can't you just be happy that it was in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, exactly. And they want the same fish. Like, you've done this for 2 years streamer fishing. You've been fishing for longer than that. Like, you've put in the time, the work, and I've even talked to Dan's gone fishing with you. Dan won't even tell me where you guys went fishing because and I would, if we ever go fishing, I would never tell anyone. I'm sure vice versa for you with my spots. Like, it's just I try not to hate on people, but they just want the instant gratification without
they don't want to put the hard work in. That makes that trout that you're holding in your hands worth that much more.
Exactly, and it is like, especially you've logged the hours, and I love social media for the fact that I get to see, your beautiful catches and stuff like that, and other people's. It personally motivates me. Like I don't want you to tell me like I caught this fish here, do this, then you catch it. I want to suffer for like years, and then like 4 years go by and I catch that 26-inch trout, and I'm like, it's the highlight of my life because I worked my ass off for that fish. And
that's what it's all about, man. It's grinding those hours away, grinding those casts away. It's a grind. It really is. I know, but on social media I make it look like I catch 15, 20-inch brown trout a day when it's not like that. You guys don't see the hours, the broken rods, you know what I mean? The 20 times I fell in freezing cold water.
The heartbreaks of missing a fish,
or having a 20-inch trout literally a centimeter from your net, and he pops off. I mean, it's moments like that you don't see. It's I love showing people the trout I catch, and it instantly jacks them to streamer fish.
Yeah.
That's what I love more than anything, is seeing people come into the tackle shack and they're just like, all right, I want everything that you use to get streamers or get these streamer eating browns. And that just puts a big smile on my face because I set that spark under someone's ass to go out there and try something different, fly fish a little bit against the grain, and that's what it's all about. It's all about that streamer eat. And like I had a kid come in the other day that he came in. It was like, where's the streamer junkie?
Mm-hmm.
And Don was like, he's over there. And I talked to him, and this kid was so pumped about seeing my stuff. And I gave up one of my not so popular spots. There's big brown trout in it. It's just it's heavily trafficked.
Yeah.
And he went over there and he hooked into 17, 18-inch brown on a sculpin pattern that I tied. And he came back and he was just so pumped.
His eyes light up.
Yeah, and that's honestly what I live for right there. And if that's all the only thing people remember me by is just Ryan the streamer junkie, I've lived a good life.
I'd say for sure. Yeah, and it's definitely, especially as things become modernized, more people are indoors. Getting especially the younger generation out. Even myself, like I'm 20, like there's not a lot of 20-year-olds that do what I do, spend the amount of time outside that I do. I'm very thankful for my parents for kicking me in. They used to set a timer and you could play video games for an hour and then
I grew up the same way.
You're outside.
I used to hate it, and now looking back at it, I was like, I'm so glad you made me go outside.
Same, exactly.
And now sitting inside it eats away at me, and I have to go outside, so for that I'm very grateful.
Probably the only thing I'm thankful about indoors is I love when I'm not fishing, is you start like getting in your head, and I'm sure especially you with the big fish, you're like, what's out there, and you're like, and even like you've pumped me to go streamer fishing sometimes where I break my my normal nymphing routine and I go streamer fishing, and like you start thinking like, yeah, it's slow, but you're like, it's the next cast, it's the next cast.
That's the one thing that keeps me going when I'm out there, is that very next cast. That could be a 24-inch trout. And another tip I'll give you guys is always keep your eye on your streamer. Never look around. You're hunting, so if you always fish your streamer completely out. If you cast it, make sure you follow your streamer all the way in. I've had so many eat right before I was getting ready to sling another cast out and eat right at my feet. It does happen, so make sure you fish that streamer all the way. I'm not saying all the way to the rod tip and do some figure eights like muskie fishing, but just make sure you fish your fly completely all the way through, especially if you're wade fishing.
Yeah. All right, so you got one day, your last day alive, Any place in the world, any situation, where are you fishing? What are you fishing?
Oh man,
It's a tough question.
it's very tough because I think if I ever fish salt, I would never go back. Just because everything needs streamers over there.
Yeah.
But I love my brown trout to death. But I would have to say golden dorado. I'm not really sure exactly where they are, but if I could go over there and throw a muskrat-sized mouse at a pack of feeding golden dorado, I think honestly I could die a very, very happy man.
You might die on the catch. Those things are massive. I don't know where it is either. Those things are huge.
They're fishing the same size streams I fish, and these things hunt like wolf packs. And I remember watching one video. This guy just chucks a streamer in the middle of the pack, and they're all fighting over the streamer. Oh man, if brown trout were like that, man,
Be game
awesome.
over. That's sweet, man. Anything else? I really don't have any more questions for you. Anything you'd like to add?
I like weight rods is another question I get a lot. What weight rod do I use? I use a 7-weight. A lot of people think that's overgunning it, but like I said before, earlier on, it's not about the fight for me. It's all about the streamery.
Mm-hmm.
I set the hook, quick net job. I don't want to fight him for a half an hour. I want him to, when I release him, I want him to actually swim away. So it's all about quick net job and all that stuff. So I think 7-weight can really handle. If you want to be versatile and throw small streamers up to like 7 to 8 inch streamers, a 7-weight's gonna do the job.
What about like length, like rod length?
Length, I like the good old 9 foot. I've tried shorter rods. It's just I don't like the shorter rods. I guess that's just personal preference. And for what I do, a 10-foot rod would just be one more foot that I could break. So.
What rod are you actually fishing right now?
I fish personally with a Sage Bolt, 7-weight. It has a broken tip right now, so I'm currently using Temple Fork Outfitters, the Clouser series, and an 8-weight actually, with a 7-weight line. So a little overgunned right now, but that's what happens when you break rods like I do.
Yeah.
So.
Is that just catching it with the sculpin?
What's that?
How do you break the tip with a sculpin? You said that.
Well, you know how it's so heavily weighted.
Yeah.
It just comes back because you don't have a lot of casting room on these small streams. It's not going to give you that nice clear lane where you just do 10 to 2 kind of thing. So you got to do sideways, or you got to cast over your non-casting arm and stuff like that. And sometimes the wind catches that sculpin just right, and or I just suck at casting. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, when we fish lake competitions, I have a 10-foot 6-weight syndicate. Have you ever fished a syndicate?
I've heard so much about it. I've heard a lot about it from Scott Grassi.
Yeah.
Because I know he fishes them. They just make 10-foot rods, right? I just don't.
Yeah, they make a 9.
If they made a 9, I'd probably hit
try
them up, but
yeah.
just the 10 is just too much for me. But I've heard so much good stuff about syndicate rods lately, and I love the smaller companies kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're good. They have good customer service too.
And that's what it always comes down to.
Yeah.
Is if I don't care what kind of rod you make, if it's 24 karat gold and it catches 25-inch brown trout every cast. If you have shitty customer service, I don't like your company.
Yeah. Now, see, I got the rod. I traded one of my nipping rods for it because I fish. I'm starting to get into lakes a little bit more for competition.
Yep.
Do you have lakes in your routine at all?
I see what happened to me last year is I got sucked into like fishing lakes for largemouth. Something I never really did with a fly rod and actually enjoyed it. But this year, like throwing big stuff with sinking line, I picked up a few, decent sized bass, and I've absolutely fell in love with lake fishing. If you do it right, lake fishing is a blast. I caught my biggest pickerel, which is not a big deal with some people, but that's my first, toothy It's poor man's muskie, all right?
Yeah. So no, you've never got a muskie?
I have one instance I'll tell you about that haunts me to death, man. I was out there smallmouth fishing, and I was set up for smallmouth. I didn't have a heavy leader or anything, and I threw against the log jam, and this big old white mouth came out and just engulfed my double deceiver. Now, if you know anything about smallmouth bass, that wasn't a bass because that mouth was just too big.
Yeah.
And I knew it was something because as soon as he took it, it was just gone. As soon as I set the hook, and I was flailing around my fly line because it just took my fly line and it snapped my rod right in half.
Jesus.
And it still had my line going. And it was under logs, over logs. So that was my first instance with a muskie. It completely annihilated my rod. And then I've had one follow my streamer all the way up to my feet, and I'm just yelling, "Eat it, eat it," and doing the old muskie, just following, making you look stupid. But I'm gonna put a lot of time in this year for muskie fishing. It's gonna be hard for me because of waiting.
Yeah.
But I just think it's just like brown trout. You gotta watch your highs and your lows and temperatures, water temperature, spikes in it. Just watch climate, stuff like that. If you tune it in, you can hit that spot at the right time. You know how people say, "I wish I was there or I wasn't there at the right time or the right spot." If you do your homework and you watch the weather, you watch your water levels, the gauges, and all that stuff, you can actually time it to where you are there at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do. And I make it look easy, but I do a lot of my homework.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to do that with muskie this year.
That's sweet.
So,
I actually I bought some muskie flies, and they are huge.
I just got some from Dominic, and they're all 12 inches. And
Exactly. Like I bought them in my head, like this is gonna be like an 8 inch. Like I knew it would be bigger. Like
do you remember that the blog I put up about that brown trout that ate that muskie fly?
I don't think so.
I was coming back with a buddy from muskie fishing, and we didn't see anything. We stopped by a hole that I knew held 2 or 3 big browns.
Mm-hmm.
It's always one of my mouse spots. If you don't catch anything that night, we're gonna go over there and at least have a blow up. And I went over there, a couple casts, he had a blow up. I'm all rigged up for muskie, so I didn't even bother. And I was sitting there watching. I got impatient, went to the car, got my rod, went out there, and I cast out there. Third strip from the opposite bank. This thing just annihilated my 12 inch, or not even 12 inch, just like 10, 11.
That's still a massive
inch
fly.
streamer. I mean, it only had one hook in the middle,
Yeah.
so it was a big muskie streamer. And to this day, I'm pretty sure that thing was like 25 inches. We got some crappy pictures of me holding it at a distance because it was unexpected, but they do eat musky flies.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
It's just another cool story, and I'm sure you got plenty more. Yeah, but I got some, I'd love to fish with you sometime. We talked, I got some ideas that I want to run by with some of the people that I'm talking to. I won't mention any of that on here. We'll talk a little bit after we go off air, but definitely looking forward to, I'd love to fish with you. You can show me the ropes a little bit, streamer fishing.
Of course, man.
And, yeah, maybe I can tie you some flies that are better than Dom's. No, I'm just kidding. I'm really actually super looking forward to seeing him this weekend. I'm not really going to get into doing that super big because I'm still the comp guy that I am.
Yeah, but I want you to have that in your arsenal. Though.
Yeah.
Like for that situation you talk about, you and Dan, if you would have been prepared for that situation, you would have landed that 20-inch trout. No problem.
Exactly, and it's something I get a little bit of pushback from my comp buddies. They like to joke at my, you're fishing a streamer, or you're going to fish this rod now. And I'm, it's just, I love the comp fishing, I love the tight lining, but at the same time, I do want to be that well-rounded angler. And, that's my favorite thing about fly fishing is all these different avenues where, my fear is that I've been doing this for a long time, and especially now, like I'm hitting it hard. Like I've been fishing a lot, and, I don't ever want to lose that passion. And, I think about it and I'm like, well, tight lining starts to suck. I do this,
Throwing a streamer.
multi-species, like it's incredible. And, I'm still pumped. Like I want to catch a muskie on a fly. My dad's talking about, we're going to try to catch some smallies, which is something that, you've been doing a little bit more.
I can't wait until spring, summer that we're going to go out for smallies. I love them more than brown trout. Everybody just heard me say that. Smallmouth. There's Dominic's, one of Dominic's best friends is his name's Chris Bretz, and he has taken me out for smallmouth a couple times, and he was like, "I'll turn you into a smallmouth guy," and he did. So he's the one that ruined me with that. There's nothing like a smallmouth on the fly. I'll take that over anything. And it's so easy to get a smallmouth to eat a 7-inch to 8-inch fly. It's so easy.
Yeah. Well, and especially, growing up in Buffalo with Lake Erie, smallmouth is, a big part of my early days of fishing. It's something that, we would go turkey hunting in the morning and you can only turkey hunt until noon. And so we're out there, we take the boat with us turkey hunting and we're in Lake Erie after noon. And we're fully dressed in camo from hunting. Didn't even change, and we're in the river. I'm not in the river, in the lake, and we're catching smallies. And that's obviously on normal tackle gear, but yeah. I'd love to definitely try that. I'm still a trout bum, I'm still the trout guy, but I definitely, I want to branch out.
I think I could change your mind once you get one of these.
Maybe it's possible.
There's nothing like. I've never caught anything like Lake Erie size smallmouth. Just so everybody knows that. I've caught probably my biggest maybe 17, 16, 17 inch, which it's a big smallmouth for smallmouth in this area, and that's all it took was that one fish, and I was like, that has fought harder than any brown trout that I've ever caught, harder than any largemouth I've ever caught, and that's really all I have experience in is trout. Yeah. So once I felt that, I was like, oh man, this is a new world.
Now with the smallies, is it more, because like with the browns, you said you don't really care about the fight, it's all about that rip. Is it more of, do they still take, is it still an aggressive take, or is it more about the fight?
It's all about the take. And there's no way you're going to wrestle a smallmouth in. I don't care who you are. Those things fight like bulldogs, and you're not just going to rip them into the net. What gets me about smallmouth is when trout are shut down, it's kind of depressing time for me, like when the water gets too warm for trout, because I'm one of those people that will not fish when I have a chance to kill a trout. I just won't do it.
Yeah.
And that's the time I really focus on smallmouth, and I love how you can switch over from doing top water with smallmouth and then throw a big streamer. I love how they'll eat anything on some days, and then some days it seems like they're not there. But the one thing with streamers that I like about smallies than trout is I'll have multiple smallmouth days. Even if I'm having a bad day, I'll catch 3 or 4 smallmouth. On a bad trout day, I'll catch nothing. So.
Yeah, so it's more of a numbers game so much with the smallmouth than with the browns. Not big numbers, but numbers.
This year I'm going bigger going home with smallmouth because I would throw anything. I'd throw a conehead woolly bugger, just to pick up some smallmouth. This year I'm throwing 7-inch, 8-inch streamers, and I'm catching that river donkey that we have somewhere in Fodder County.
Yep. So you're fishing rivers for these smallies.
Yeah.
So you got 17-inch smallie out of a river is massive.
See, that's my guess because, like I told you, I never measure my fish.
Yeah.
It's just based off of picture proportions up against my rod. But if you don't know anything about smallies, it takes like 8 to 10 years for them to get over 20. So so 17-inch, that's pretty old trout for a river fish. I would love to come across one over 20 inches.
Yeah.
That's a big goal of mine, but I think I'm going to get that around Lake Erie or Susquehanna or something.
that's even 17, like you said, roughly, like that's a big river because I'm happy with 17 out of the lake. Yeah. Like, that's a good fish. Like, and I don't know what they got a little bit better feed in Lake Erie. That's why they get those huge, massive smallies that they do. But that's no slouch of a fish, and they say pound for pound, smallies are the best fighting fish in the world.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
I might change my mind after a muskie takes.
That's
muskie
true.
Takes it by my feet again, but
yeah, it's definitely on my bucket list too. A muskie on the fly. Yeah, but it's been real, man. I can hardly see you because I never turn the lights on in the room.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
So I think we'll wrap it up. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We'll chat a little bit after, but it was good. I learned a lot personally. I hope everyone else did. I'm excited to explore this more. I'm really at that point where like I'm fly fishing a lot more now. I've always been a fly fisherman since I was 11, but I'm really into it. This is what I love to do. And I'm just excited. So look forward to chatting more, fishing more. And best of luck to you the rest of the winter. I can't wait to see the rest of your success this season. And yeah, I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, sounds good. If you guys want to check out Ryan, he's at StreamerJunkie17 on Instagram, and his page is Streamer Addicts on Facebook. Highly recommend especially his Streamer Addict page on Facebook. He posts a lot of fly ties, tutorials, tips and tricks, blogs, instructional posts, videos, whatnot. Highly recommend it. A lot of great content. Something I always look forward to, reading, looking at, and watching. So please give him a follow, show him some love, and look for some of his big fish to come. Thanks, guys.